If their blood didn't boil under the Black Suns of Nara, ours will serve as a fitting replacement. The words reverberated through the void, traveling light years in every direction. A grim declaration from the commander of the human battleship Vanguard. The crew, hardened and resolute, understood the gravity of the message. Yet, none wavered as it echoed through the ship's bulkheads. They had long awaited this moment, their opportunity to confront the Draon, the galaxy's scourge, and exact revenge for their numerous atrocities. The Gyrans were a race of invaders, their influence stretching across dozens of star systems, leaving devastation in their path. They were beings born of shadow and flame, with colossal war fleets that were unstoppable. Their technology was beyond the comprehension of most civilizations. Entire empires fell before them, entire species driven to extinction or subjugation. Once, they were mere myths, whispered about in the dark expanse of space until they descended upon the galaxy with unparalleled fury, reshaping recorded history. But humanity was different. Humans had heard the tales and watched as the Draon devoured their neighbors, drawing ever nearer to Earth's sector. They were not blind to the encroaching doom. Where others had begged for mercy or tried to hide, humanity had prepared. Resources were mobilized. Minds from every corner of the planet worked in concert. There would be no negotiations, no surrender, no salvation from the stars. Only one truth remained. Survival would be on humanity's terms alone. The Vanguard was forged in the crucible of desperation, a vessel unlike any in human history. It was a behemoth built not just for war, but for the complete annihilation of any who threatened humanity. Armed with weapons that could warp the fabric of space, shields that could endure the core of a star, and engines fueled by the fury of 1,000 suns, it was humanity's answer to the Draon menace. And now, it was poised as humanity's spear aimed directly at the heart of the Draon Empire. "Captain, we're approaching the outer defense grid," reported Lieutenant Harris, his voice steady and betraying none of the tension that gripped the crew. Captain Marcus Locke nodded, his gaze fixed on the view screen that displayed the cold void of space ahead. The Draon defense grid was renowned, an intricate network of automated battle stations, mines, and patrol ships that had obliterated countless invaders long before they glimpsed the Draon homeworld. But the Vanguard was no ordinary ship, and Locke was no ordinary captain. "Initiate cloak," Locke commanded, his voice as cold as the void surrounding them. The Vanguard shimmered and disappeared from view, its advanced stealth technology cloaking the ship in an imperceptible bubble to Draon sensors. To the Draon, it was as though nothing existed in that space, only emptiness. But the humans knew better. They understood that the Draon relied on their superior technology, their arrogance blinding them to a threat that could bypass their defenses. "We're in position," Harris announced. "Deploy the spikes," Locke ordered. The Vanguard's hull opened in several places, releasing sleek black projectiles that embedded themselves in the floating battle stations and patrol ships. These were not conventional weapons, but rather infiltration devices. Once attached, they began to burrow into Draon technology, hacking systems, overriding controls, and turning the once deadly defense grid into a puppet of the Vanguard's will. "Spikes are active, Captain," said Harris. "We're in control of the grid." "Good," Locke replied, a rare smile crossing his face. "Open fire." The Vanguard's weapons activated, but not in the way the Draon would have anticipated. Instead of a barrage of missiles or energy blasts, the ship used the defense grid against itself. The battle stations turned on each other, firing at their allies. Patrol ships erupted in sudden, unprovoked explosions, and mines detonated in meticulously calculated patterns, destroying the Draon defenses without a single shot fired from the Vanguard itself. The crew watched as their plan unfolded with precision and effectiveness. The Vanguard's crew observed the chaos unfolding on their screens with a mix of grim satisfaction and focused determination. The Draon defense grid, once a formidable barrier, was now a tangled mess of malfunctioning systems and friendly fire. The enemy's once imposing defenses were being dismantled from within, leaving the path clear for the final assault. "Captain, the outer grid is collapsing," Harris reported. "We've cleared a path to the inner defenses." Locke nodded. "Prepare for Phase 2. Activate the drone swarm." The Vanguard's launch bays opened, releasing a cloud of sleek, silent drones. These were not ordinary reconnaissance units but advanced, multi-purpose drones equipped with sophisticated jamming technology and weaponry. Their mission was twofold: disable the remaining defensive installations and gather real-time intelligence on the Draon command structure. As the drones spread out, they began to disrupt communication channels and intercept transmissions. The Draon, caught off guard by the Vanguard's unexpected maneuver, scrambled to regain control, but their efforts were futile against the well-coordinated swarm. "Captain, we're detecting a high concentration of Draon ships in the vicinity of the central command station," Harris said, his eyes scanning the readouts. "Excellent," Locke replied. "Set course for the command station. Full speed ahead." The Vanguard surged forward, cutting through the remnants of the Draon defenses like a knife through butter. The massive battleship maneuvered with surprising agility, its advanced propulsion systems allowing it to dodge the occasional remaining resistance. The command station loomed ahead, a massive structure bristling with weaponry and shields. "Deploy the assault pods," Locke ordered. The Vanguard's hull opened once more, releasing a series of heavily armored assault pods designed for breaching and boarding actions. Each pod was a self-contained unit, equipped with cutting-edge weaponry and shield generators. As the pods hurtled toward the command station, they pierced through its outer defenses and crashed into the station's surface with devastating force. Explosive decompression and heavy damage created breaches, and the Vanguard's troops poured out, armed and ready. Captain Locke led the charge, his presence inspiring confidence among the soldiers. They advanced through the breach, cutting down any Draon forces that resisted. The station's corridors were soon echoing with the clash of combat and the hum of energy weapons. Despite the fierce resistance, the disciplined and well-prepared human forces pressed on, determined to reach the central command hub. Inside the command hub, Draon leaders were frantically coordinating their defenses and attempting to counter the invasion. But their efforts were undermined by the Vanguard's strategic planning and the relentless advance of human troops. "Commander Krell, we've lost control of the grid," a Draon officer reported, panic evident in their voice. "The invaders are inside the station." Krell, a high-ranking Draon general, snarled in frustration. "Then we have no choice. Activate the self-destruct sequence. We will not let them claim our command center." The Draon forces began the self-destruct countdown, but Locke and his team were closing in. As they fought their way to the central control room, they encountered heavy resistance. The space was a hive of activity, with Draon soldiers desperately trying to buy time for the self-destruct sequence to complete. Captain Locke reached the control room just as the countdown neared its final minutes. With a decisive move, he and his team fought through the last of the Draon defenders and reached the control console. The tension was palpable as Locke's fingers flew over the interface, overriding the self-destruct sequence and taking control of the command hub. "We've got it, Captain," Harris's voice crackled through the comms. "We've disabled the self-destruct and secured the central control." Locke allowed himself a brief moment of relief. "Excellent work. Prepare to consolidate our hold on the station and begin the extraction of any surviving Draon leadership." With the command hub now under human control, the Vanguard's forces began the process of securing the station and extracting valuable intelligence. The Draon's centralized command and control capabilities were effectively dismantled, marking a significant victory in the ongoing struggle. As the Vanguard pulled back to regroup and assess their gains, Captain Locke surveyed the results of their mission with satisfaction. The Draon had been dealt a severe blow, and humanity had proven its resolve and capability. The battle was far from over, but with each victory, humanity was inching closer to turning the tide against the formidable Draon Empire. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, but the Vanguard and its crew were ready for whatever came next. The cold void of space seemed to pulse with the aftermath of the Vanguard's triumph. As the battleship drifted away from the now crippled Draon command station, the crew busied themselves with the monumental task of analyzing the captured data and consolidating their gains. The massive ship floated in the darkness, its sleek silhouette a stark contrast against the backdrop of distant stars. Captain Marcus Locke stood in the command center, his gaze fixed on the expansive view screen. The once unimaginable task of breaching the Draon's inner sanctum had been achieved, But the victory was bittersweet. The Draon Empire was vast, and one command station was just a single node in a sprawling web of control and power. Captain, we've secured all critical systems and have begun data extraction from the command hub, Lieutenant Harris reported, his voice carrying a hint of exhaustion but also satisfaction. We're also receiving initial reports from the drone swarm about scattered Draon forces regrouping in the sector. Locke nodded. Prepare a summary of the extracted data. We need to understand the full scope of the Draon's capabilities and their remaining strength in this region. Additionally, we need to ascertain if there's any strategic significance to the locations the remaining forces are concentrating on. As the crew worked diligently, Locke turned his attention to the holographic display of the galaxy. The Draon Empire's sprawling influence was mapped out in vivid detail, and the recent victory had only altered a fraction of their territory. It was clear that this battle was only the beginning of a much larger conflict. Captain, we've decrypted a significant portion of the data, Harris said as he approached with a tablet in hand. It appears the Draon have several key strongholds across the galaxy, with a particularly fortified sector near the galactic core. There's also mention of a massive war fleet assembling. Locke studied the data with a frown. They're consolidating their forces. It's clear they're preparing for a counteroffensive. We need to strike while they're still vulnerable. A commotion from the Tactical Operations Center drew Locke's attention. An officer hurried over, his face etched with concern. Captain, we've received a distress signal from an Allied outpost on the fringes of Draon territory. It's a heavily encrypted message, but it seems to indicate that the Draon are launching a large-scale offensive against remaining human outposts. Damn, Locke muttered. They're retaliating. We can't allow them to gain the upper hand. He turned to Harris. Prepare a battle plan for a counteroffensive. We need to support our allies and disrupt the Draon's regrouping efforts. We'll use the intelligence we've gathered to strike at their vulnerable points. Harris nodded, already inputting commands into the system. Understood, Captain. I'll coordinate with the fleet and ensure we're ready to deploy within the hour. As the Vanguard's crew mobilized for the next phase of their campaign, Locke took a moment to reflect on the gravity of their mission. The conflict with the Draon was not just a battle for survival, but a fight for the future of humanity. Each victory came with its own set of challenges, and each step forward was fraught with peril. The crew gathered in the briefing room, where Locke laid out the details of their new objective. The holographic projection of the Draon Empire highlighted several critical targets. Our next mission is twofold. First, we will aid the Allied outpost under threat. Second, we'll launch a series of targeted strikes against Draon supply lines and key installations to disrupt their offensive preparations. The room buzzed with a mix of anticipation and determination. The crew understood the stakes and was ready to act. Lieutenant Harris outlined the tactical details, ensuring everyone knew their role in the upcoming operations. As the briefing concluded, Captain Locke stood at the viewport of his quarters, gazing out at the endless expanse of space. The weight of command pressed heavily on his shoulders, but he was resolute. Humanity's struggle against the Draon was far from over, and the road ahead would be arduous. But with each step, they were forging a new path in the galaxy, one where humanity's spirit and resilience would be tested and proven. The Vanguard was more than a ship. It was a symbol of hope, a beacon of resistance in the face of overwhelming darkness. Captain, Harris's voice came over the comms. We're ready for departure. The fleet is in position, and the Allied outpost has sent coordinates for the distress signal. Good, Locke replied. Let's show the Draon that we're not to be underestimated. Engage warp drive and set course for the outpost. It's time to turn the tide. As the Vanguard and its fleet slipped into warp, leaving the crippled Draon command station behind, the crew braced themselves for the next chapter in their relentless campaign. The fight for survival was far from over, but with unwavering resolve, they prepared to face whatever lay ahead in their quest to reclaim their future from the shadows of the Draon Empire. The Vanguard emerged from warp space in the vicinity of the Allied outpost, a small but strategic installation nestled on the edge of Draon territory. The scene that greeted them was one of chaos and destruction. The once pristine outpost now lay under heavy bombardment, its defensive perimeter breached and its structure smoldering. Captain, we're detecting multiple Draon ships attacking the outpost, Lieutenant Harris reported, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the data. We've also identified several remaining Allied vessels trying to mount a defense. Locke's jaw tightened. Deploy all available fighters and engage the Draon forces. We need to protect the outpost and assist the remaining Allied ships. Helm, set a course to intercept the enemy forces and prepare for evasive maneuvers. The Vanguard's fighter bays opened, releasing a swarm of sleek combat fighters. These agile crafts swiftly engaged the Draon ships, weaving through the debris-strewn battlefield. The Vanguard itself moved into position, its formidable weapons systems primed and ready. "Captain, Allied command is hailing us," Harris said. "They're requesting immediate support and coordination for a counterattack." "Put them through," Locke ordered. The screen flickered, revealing the weary face of Commander Elira, the head of the Allied outpost. "Captain Locke, thank the stars you're here. We're taking heavy losses. The Draon forces have overwhelmed our defenses and are targeting key infrastructure." "We're here to help, Commander," Locke said, his voice steady. "We'll provide air support and assist with evacuations if necessary. Let's work together to push back these attackers." The Vanguard's weapons opened fire, sending concentrated bursts of energy toward the Draon ships. The fighters coordinated their attacks with precision, creating a protective shield around the outpost. The once lopsided battle began to turn in favor of the defenders. "Enemy reinforcements are arriving," Harris warned. "We're detecting a new wave of Draon ships entering the sector." "Damn it," Locke muttered. "We need to buy time for the outpost's remaining defenses to stabilize. Deploy the Vanguard's shield generators to create a defensive perimeter around the outpost and increase the intensity of our counteroffensive." The Vanguard's powerful shields projected a protective dome around the outpost, absorbing and deflecting incoming fire. The Draon ships, now faced with a fortified defense, struggled to penetrate the new barrier. The Vanguard's guns continued to blaze, targeting the Draon reinforcements with ruthless efficiency. "Captain, Allied forces have successfully initiated a counteroffensive," Harris reported. "They're pushing back the Draon and stabilizing their defenses." "Good," Locke replied. "Maintain pressure on the enemy. We need to ensure they don't regroup or reinforce." The battle raged on, with the Vanguard and Allied forces working in concert to repel the Draon invaders. The once chaotic battlefield began to clear as the Draon forces were driven back. The outpost, though battered, was holding its ground. As the last of the Draon ships retreated, Locke turned his attention to Commander Elira. "Commander, are there any casualties or critical issues we should be aware of?" Elira sighed with relief. "We've suffered significant losses, but the immediate threat has been neutralized. We'll need to assess the damage and repair our systems. Your intervention was timely and crucial." Locke nodded. "We'll provide any support you need. Our primary objective is to ensure the Draon don't launch another offensive from this sector." As the Vanguard's crew began assisting with repairs and coordinating the recovery efforts, Locke took a moment to review the latest intelligence reports. The data they had gathered from the Draon command station was proving invaluable in understanding the enemy's strategies and capabilities. "Captain, we've received a transmission from High Command," Harris said, breaking into Locke's thoughts. "They're requesting a status update and your strategic recommendations. Prepare a full report and include our findings from the command station," Locke instructed. "Also, suggest that they fortify the sector and prepare for potential retaliatory strikes." As the report was prepared and sent, Locke's thoughts turned to the larger strategic picture. The Draon Empire's aggression was relentless, and their ability to adapt quickly made them a formidable opponent. But humanity had proven its capacity for resilience and ingenuity. Each battle fought and each victory won were steps toward a greater goal. Later that evening, as the Vanguard floated in the silent aftermath of the battle, Captain Locke gathered his senior officers for a briefing. The mood was sober but hopeful, as the crew knew the fight was far from over. "Excellent work today, everyone," Locke began. "We've held our ground and turned the tide in this sector. However, this is just one battle in a much larger conflict. We need to stay vigilant and prepared for the Draon's next move." Lieutenant Harris spoke up. "The data we've gathered will help us anticipate their strategies. We'll continue to analyze it and refine our tactics." "Good," Locke replied. "Our next steps will involve strengthening our alliances, securing key positions, and preparing for the inevitable counterattacks. We've proven that we can stand against the Draon, and now we need to build on that success. The officers nodded in agreement, their expressions reflecting both determination and resolve. The Vanguard and its crew were more than ready for the challenges ahead. They were fighting not just for survival but for the future of humanity, a future that, despite the darkness of the Draon threat, was filled with the promise of hope and triumph. As the stars twinkled in the vast expanse of space, Captain Locke stood resolute. The path forward was fraught with danger, but with courage, unity, and relentless resolve, humanity would face it head-on. The Vanguard continued its patrol in the newly secured sector, the recent battle having provided a temporary reprieve from the Draon onslaught. Captain Marcus Locke, however, knew that this calm was deceptive. The Draon Empire was vast, and their capacity for swift retaliation was a constant threat. As the Vanguard's crew worked tirelessly to repair and reinforce the outpost, Locke convened a strategy meeting in the briefing room. The room was filled with the hum of activity as officers reviewed the latest intelligence and prepared for the next phase of their mission. Captain, Lieutenant Harris began as he entered the room. We've completed the analysis of the data from the Draon command station. We've identified several key locations within the Draon Empire, including a heavily fortified sector near the galactic core. It appears to be a central hub for their military operations. Locke studied the holographic display of the galaxy, which now highlighted the Draon's core sector. This is critical information. If we can strike at their central hub, we might be able to disrupt their entire war effort. Agreed, Harris replied. The core sector is heavily defended, but our analysis suggests there are vulnerabilities in their outer defenses. If we can exploit these weaknesses, we could penetrate their inner defenses. Captain Locke turned to Commander Elira, who had joined the meeting. Commander, how is your outpost faring after the attack? Elira nodded. We're stabilizing. Our engineers are working around the clock to repair the damage. However, we'll need time to fully restore our defenses. In the meantime, we're ready to provide support for your mission if needed. Understood, Locke said. We'll need to coordinate closely with you and other allied forces as we prepare for this assault. Our objective is to disrupt the Draon's core operations and force them into a defensive posture. The briefing room was filled with a sense of urgency as plans were drawn up and strategies formulated. The crew knew that striking at the heart of the Draon Empire would be a perilous endeavor, but it was a necessary step to secure a strategic advantage. As the meeting concluded, Captain Locke returned to his quarters to review the final details of the mission. His thoughts were interrupted by a communication from the Vanguard's intelligence officer, Ensign Rodriguez. Captain, we've received an encrypted transmission from an unknown source. It appears to be a distress signal originating from the core sector. The encryption matches Draon protocols, but the content is heavily garbled. Locke's interest was piqued. Can you decipher any part of the message? Rodriguez nodded. We've managed to extract a few fragments. It seems to mention a critical facility under threat and a plea for assistance. A distress signal from within the Draon core sector? Locke mused. That's intriguing. It could be a trap, but it might also indicate an opportunity. Prepare a team to investigate the source of the signal. We need to know if this is a genuine plea for help or a ploy to lure us into a trap. With the investigation team assembled, the Vanguard set a course for the core sector. The journey was long and fraught with tension as the ship navigated through hostile space. The crew remained on high alert, knowing that any misstep could lead to a deadly confrontation. As they approached the core sector, the Vanguard entered the region of space known for its intense gravity wells and formidable defenses. The vastness of the Draon Empire was evident, with massive fortifications and war fleets visible even from a distance. Captain, we're approaching the coordinates of the distress signal, Harris reported. We're detecting heavy Draon activity in the vicinity. Proceed with caution, Locke instructed. We don't want to alert them to our presence. Engage stealth systems and deploy reconnaissance drones to gather more information. The Vanguard's advanced stealth systems cloaked the ship, rendering it nearly invisible to Draon sensors. Reconnaissance drones were released, drifting silently through the vastness of space. The drones transmitted real-time data back to the Vanguard, revealing a sprawling Draon facility surrounded by a formidable defensive perimeter. "Captain, the drones have confirmed the location of the distress signal," Harris said. "The facility appears to be a high-security research and development center. It's heavily fortified, but there are signs of internal chaos." "Prepare a tactical plan," Locke said. "If this facility is in turmoil, it might be our chance to gather valuable intelligence or even cripple their operations. We need to determine the best approach to infiltrate the facility without drawing attention." The crew worked quickly to devise a plan. The goal was to approach the facility covertly, infiltrate it, and gather as much information as possible. The reconnaissance drones had identified several potential entry points and weak spots in the facility's defenses. As the Vanguard maneuvered into position, Captain Locke reviewed the final details of the mission with his team. "We'll launch a series of diversionary strikes to draw attention away from our main approach. Teams will infiltrate through the identified weak points and gather intelligence on the facility's operations and any ongoing projects." The teams were assembled and briefed, each member equipped with the latest stealth technology and intelligence-gathering tools. As the Vanguard prepared to execute the plan, the tension on board was palpable. The crew knew that this mission could provide crucial information that might turn the tide of the conflict, but it also carried significant risks. "Commence operation," Locke ordered. The diversionary strikes were launched, creating a series of controlled explosions and disturbances on the periphery of the facility. As Draon forces scrambled to respond, the infiltration teams moved into position, utilizing the cover of chaos to approach the facility's weak points. The mission was underway. As the teams breached the facility's defenses and made their way through the labyrinthine corridors, Captain Locke and the rest of the crew awaited their reports. The outcome of this operation could provide the critical edge needed to shift the balance of power in the ongoing war against the Draon Empire.